Hello guys, welcome to another video of our Jupyter notebook tutorial, and in this video we're gonna talk about Jupyter Lab more deeply. Now in the previous video I talked about virtual environment, so let's start in the terminal and activate the virtual environment. So as you remember, the command was source and the path to a script called activate within your virtual environment directory in the bin subdirectory. Okay, so run this command, and after running this, as you can see in the terminal, you will have the name of your virtual environment in the round brackets before the host name of your machine. In the Windows machine it is pretty similar. In the previous video I talked about the command which you need to run in order to activate the virtual environment, because that's a little bit different in the Windows. Okay, so now we are in the virtual environment and let's run the Jupyter Lab again as in the previous video. So if you run the Jupyter Lab, as you can see, in your terminal, some bunch of text will be outputted to your screen. And as you can see that it's saying that you are going to run it on the localhost 888.9 in my case. Maybe in your case it's 88888. So just check this output, and here you can see that it's saying that to access the notebook, open the file in a browser or copy and paste one of these URLs. And both of them are referring to a same host, so your host, your machine, because Jupyter Lab is some kind of a Jupyter server running in your machine, and it allows you to communicate with this server through your browser at the given host. Now, yeah, this can be quite confusing, like what is the host and what are these numbers and stuff like this. The only thing you need to know after running the Jupyter Lab, you need to go to the location which is provided in the terminal, okay? So if I go to, and even more, in many cases the Jupyter Lab will be open for yourself after running the Jupyter Lab command in your terminal. So now we are in the Jupyter Lab, and as you can see, I have created a couple of notebooks, example notebooks for this tutorial. Now, what is a notebook? Let's create our first notebook. If you want to create a notebook, you need to choose a kernel. Kernel in the Jupyter Lab is a language which is going to be run the notebook in. So in this case, we're gonna run Python. But Jupyter Lab, you can think of a Jupyter Lab as an IDE, so something like a Visual Studio Code running in your browser. Yes, it can be quite different compared to the Visual Studio Code. It can be much faster because it's not using so much RAM in many cases, but if you are using some, browser, some specific browser, it will consume much more memory. So beware of this fact and try to choose maybe different browser, try to play with it. Okay, so it's an IDE. And in the IDE we can easily create these notebooks. And notebooks are some kind of a special files for the Jupyter Lab. And in this case we're gonna create the Python Jupyter Lab notebook. So as you can see, I'm provided two Pythons here. One is the Python 3 and the other one is the Python 3.7.7 64-bit. Why do I have two of them? It's because when you run the Jupyter Lab command within a directory, and as you can see, I was running it in the Jupyter directory, so the directory of this course, and previously I created .env file. The Jupyter Lab knows that there is .env file, and in this .env file is the virtual environment. So out of the box, it is provided you to choose a kernel, either the built-in, so the built-in Python 3 installed with the homebrew, or the Python 3 which is running in the virtual environment. And because we are using the virtual environment, we're gonna use the virtual environment. Yes, and as I hover over this button, you can see that there is in the brackets Jupyter Venv. Okay, so please choose this. If you accidentally choose the other version, don't worry, you can click here and change the kernel every time you want, right? So select it, and then you can play with the kernel, you can run the Python in this notebook. So now on the left you can see the untitled YP, IP, Y and B. So that's the suffix of the Jupyter of the notebook, IPython notebook. Is being created, and it's called untitled. So if you want to rename it, just click here, right, or here, right, and choose the rename option, and let's call it my first notebook. Yeah. Okay, so to be consistent, you can also go with the camel with the snake case. This time I'm using the camel case notebook. And here on the right side, I have my running Jupyter notebook. And this Jupyter notebook is a very powerful thing. I can run the Python code inside there. And now some of you may say, yes, but you can run the code also from Visual Studio Code. So why do we need the Jupyter Lab? So Jupyter Lab provides you immediate results by running in-place Python code. So for example, let's write print hello world. For those of you who are not familiar with Python, I highly recommend my previous course when I was talking about the basics. So if you don't know anything about Python or how to create a Python code, what is the syntax and stuff like this, I recommend you to watch the course. It's very in-depth for absolute beginners, so you can find it in my profile. So let's say hello world, and if you want to run the code, you can either press this button, it will run the code, and as you can see, it was immediately printed hello world, or you can run the command, the key shortcut Shift Enter or Control Enter in Windows, Command Enter in Control Enter in the Mac. The difference between Shift and Control is that Control will stay at the given cell. This is called a cell, and Shift Enter will automatically go to the next cell. This can be very handy if you need to run a couple of cells one after another. You are just pressing the Shift Enter in this case, okay? So as you can see, I have immediate results. I don't need to highlight anything, right click and run in the interpreter. No, immediate results. Also, it's handy if you are having some variables and you want to know the value of the variable. So you don't need to write print every time. You just put the variable at the end. Now, in the Jupyter notebook, in the cell, every variable or every return value of an object on the last line or the last return variable will be returned. So this was quite complicated, yes? Michal, what are you talking here about? I'm new into Jupyter notebook, I don't understand. Simple case. So imagine you have two variables. You have variable x, which is set to 5, and you have variable y, which is set to 3. Now, when you run this, nothing will be returned because none of the commands in the cell have a return value, right? So if you want to return x, you provide x as the last variable because variables have the return value of their value, right? So x is the return value. But if you want to return y, y is the return value, yes? Now, you need to understand that notebooks are keeping the context and the state inside. So all these variables are stored in the memory. So beware of this fact. If you create a lot of variables with big data inside there, you can just kill your memory. And this happens many times. In these cases, the Jupyter notebook will stop working and it will lag. And in this case, it's very handy to use these buttons at the top. So running this button, this square, will interrupt the kernel. And what does it mean? It will basically shut down every running process. Yes? So this guy will shut down running process. For example, you are in the middle of the endless infinite loop and you are waiting for some output of a neural network, which can take a lot of memory and a lot of time. And you don't have time, you need to go outside or with your friends or to the restaurant. Yes, you just need to shut down it. You press the square, everything is okay. You can then come back and then run the cell again, right? You don't need to run the whole code. That's the biggest advantage of the Jupyter notebook. Then there is this powerful button, which is called restart a kernel. Now, when you restart a kernel, all the state will be lost. So when I click on it, I'm asked, do you want to restart the current kernel? All variables will be lost. And I go restart. And now, if I run the y, you can see name y is not defined and this number suddenly stopped to increment. And that's the reason. The reason for this is that the context of the previous runtime was lost. So yeah, I ran previously these definitions of the variables, but it's lost. So now I need to define the variables again by running the cell. Now there will be number 2 and then I can output the y. Yes? So powerful. The context and the state preserves inside the Jupyter notebook. What does it mean? So the order doesn't matter. The only thing which matters is the execution. So if I now go and create a cell at the top. As you can see, I transfer the cell to the top by holding it, and then when I print the Y here, I will get Y, even if it is at the top. So beware the fact that in the Jupyter notebooks, the order of the commands doesn't matter, just the execution, right? Okay, so these were the most important things in the Jupyter notebook, in the Jupyter Lab notebook. Now, what you can also do is you can, for example, create another notebook. So let's create another notebook, and then this is something what I like. You can split screen. Yeah, so you can have one notebook on the left side, another notebook on the right side. Then you can hide this file browser by clicking on this tab, and you have more space. It's very dynamic. Yeah, some of you may say, yeah, you can do it also in Visual Studio Code. Of course you can do, but this is much faster, and it saves your memory many times, and this is a great advantage. Now, the next thing I want to show you is that which is main distinction between the Jupyter Lab and the Jupyter Notebook, which I will cover in the next video, is that in the Jupyter Lab you can preview CSV files. Now, what is a CSV file? You can think about CSV file as a file which stores a lot of information. An Excel table, for example. Yes, the Excel tables are XLS files or some different suffix is there, but CSV files are quite common in data science and in big data engineering, and they can hold a big data, and it's quite common to use them for machine learning and stuff like this. So the Jupyter Lab provides you the possibility to preview these files. So I have created here a folder data. Now, I want to recap. Everything what you see here is basically happening in your file system. If you go to the Finder and you go to the Jupyter folder, which is the folder from which I run the Jupyter Lab command from the terminal. So here at the top, yeah, is it the Jupyter folder? You can see that there are also the IPython notebooks. So the first notebook and the untitled notebook, which I created a couple of minutes ago. So everything is happening here. So I have created here a data folder, and I put there the iris CSV file, which is an iris dataset. An iris dataset is a good known dataset for, data science beginners or machine learning beginners. And I will show you in the next videos how you can work with this iris dataset in the Jupyter Lab. So feel free to go to the internet and try to find the iris dataset or whatever CSV you want. Put it to the same directory where you are running Jupyter Lab. And then if you go to the Jupyter Lab, and then this time I go to data, you can see that here is the iris CSV added 7 hours ago. And if I double click on it, I can immediately preview. You can see it was instant. I don't need to wait to open the Excel. It was instant. So I can see instant that there are 5 columns. One is septal length, septal width, petal length, and petal width, and some species at the end. So immediate results. I can split screen, for example, and then I can work with the file in this notebook, right? Fairly simple. Now, so this was just a brief introduction into Jupyter Notebooks. Feel free to run some Python code inside there. Try to save it, close it. If you want to close the Jupyter Notebook, it isn't just like you close the window over here. No, you need to also close it here. So in order to close and quit the Jupyter Lab, you go to the terminal, click inside the terminal, and press Ctrl+C. And now you will be asked, do you really want to shut down this notebook server? And you say yes, or you press yes. Yeah, I was too slow, so yes. Press enter, 2 kernels shut down, everything is saved. If I go back to the Finder, you can see still there is my first notebook and untitled notebook, which I created for you. So pretty simple. Yes, this was the introduction into Jupyter Lab notebooks. In the next video, we're gonna talk about the Jupyter notebook, which is something little different, but the same, basically. So thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Michal Hucko, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.